Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, a tremendous day at United Supermarkets Arena, marred by that pesky final score.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks as always for making us your first listen. And today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you as always, kicking off a brand new week. As always, not so pleasant to discuss the subject at hand as we recap a wild weekend. We'll do that on a couple of fronts here this week, so make sure you're sticking with us and missing none of the conversation. We'll get to, of course, a return to Portal Palooza, as there was a bit of a frenzy, but was there anything to the frenzy? We'll get to that coming up this week. And, of course, an overtime matchup at United Supermarkets Arena on Saturday, as you have an opportunity to knock off at number 3 Iowa State, and excruciating fashion, you come up short of doing so. So what we have now, Chris, a character building opportunity for all of us involved as we discuss this result, man. I thought in some ways you did some really good things, obviously some things to critique as well. And a lot of credit to Iowa State, but had them on the ropes and let them get away.
Damn. Yeah. That's they're. I mean, they do. They won it, and I think don't want to say that you lost it, but I think you had some chances at the end, and I think I said it on the broadcast. You were playing with fire when you didn't take advantage of some of the chances you had at the tail end of regulation, and certainly in overtime with, I think it was like 45 seconds to go or so, and JT Toppin had a couple of looks on the same possession that he had knocked down, and it didn't. Maybe that was the hurt ankle that affected his shot or shots. You have arguably the one of the surest things in the building is Chance McMillan at the free throw line, and he goes 1 of 2. And you have Elijah Hawkins, who's a really good free throw shooter, 1 of 2. And those were just not things you could afford to do against a really good Iowa State team. And I'm always learning, or you look at things differently than maybe other people do. And it was just interesting because I was focused really on that. And at the end of the broadcast and even the post game and all that. And Grant immediately, when I talked to him, so fascinating sometimes to talk to these coaches, and it's hard after a loss like that. Not my favorite thing to do, but he didn't really point to any of that because he was more frustrated or more pointing to the other end of the floor. And he's like, we can talk about all the things that we missed, but we could not get them stopped. They got to the paint, they got downhill, were either giving up a layup or panicking and a foul call or whatever, and that's what ultimately cost us. And I think what he's still in the process of is trying to get a bunch of individual offensive players to collectively buy into what it takes from a toughness and a defensive standpoint. And you're still not quite there. Now, having said all that, Iowa State has a lot to say about that. This is one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team in the league. And I'll be fascinated whenever Iowa State and Houston get together and play, because that'll be a doozy. But it's funny I mentioned Houston, because with your issues and your inability to get people stopped or make it hard on them or keep them out of the paint, I really worry about 2 matchups versus Houston. You have the 2 of them. Play them twice, and I'm like, that, and I don't really know other than just playing harder, and I don't know schematically necessarily what you can do, but that's your problem right now. And I think you played a couple of teams up in Utah that were a little bit more finesse and move the ball, and they don't try to necessarily get downhill on you. And then you saw what an elite team who they just kind of figured out a way to win it. And you can argue that you kind of allowed kept the door open, which you did based on some of the misses. And it's just, and I'll say this too, at some point that game is going to come back to bite you. I just don't know at what level. Does it put you on the bubble because you didn't win it? Does it affect your seeding? Does it keep you out of the tournament? I don't know. But at some level, because that one was that you were going to get extra credit for that win. And there's only so many chances you have in this league to get an extra credit type of win. And that was one of them. And you did. You kind of let it slip through your fingers there. And it's just so weird that you're 0-2 at home and 2-0 on the road through 4 games in the league. But this is where we sit.
If we do view it as extra credit, though, it's kind of hard to believe it'd be held against you. However, I don't know if everybody agrees that it's something extra, or if it was a must-have or whatever. That could vary. But hopefully down the road here's what actually hopefully will play out. You win so many games, you give yourself a big enough buffer. We're not even having to necessarily notate this result. And I think all those things are fine for a head coach to say, for Grant McCasland to point to immediately after the game, as far as all the ways in which you failed to give yourself a bigger margin, where things at the free throw line don't matter in the final few minutes. You kind of say the same thing about, one mistake down the stretch, or, a call here or there. A head coach should always point to all the other things that really complete the picture. As for me, John Q fan, John Q podcast host, make the free throws, win the game, go home a winner, and we're not talking about any of the other things, because you did enough of the other things well enough to put yourself in a position to win the game and beat the third-ranked team in the nation. But 90% free throw shooting goes to 50% free throw shooting between Elijah Hawkins, Chance McMillan. You have a chance to make it a 4-point game. You didn't do it. I know that we typically run about a half hour on these Locked On Texas Tech experiences. I don't need all that half hour to chop this one up. And that's why it's so excruciating, Chris, because you did all the things well enough to beat this team if you make your free throws. And, man, with each subsequent free throw missed, kind of thinking, all right, we're really toying with the basketball gods here, playing with fire. God don't like ugly. Basketball gods don't like missed free throws in crunch time against the number 3 team in the nation. And I'm not surprised we get the result we get. I mean, I know that these are some things that are from the ether, not really tangible, but I know you know what I'm talking about, man. You do little things well or not well in those biggest moments, and the script kind of repeats itself. You don't find success when you do it that way. And I can't really, I can't sit here and, just personally speaking, as a fan, get too bogged down in all the things that Iowa State did well, you didn't do well, you wish you did this better, wish you defended better. Of course, that's all true. And I'm glad your head coach does point to all of that, because you don't want to tie it into 2 single trips to the free throw line. But you and I know what you had in your hands, final few minutes or seconds of the game. And you let it slip away. You rescued defeat from the jaws of victory, as they like to say. So there's like a weird conflict for me, because all the things you did well that I saw with my own 2 eyes that had number 3 in a position where they actually deserved to lose the game. And then that's why you got to finish the game, because things can change very, very quickly. So I don't want to take any credit away from Iowa State in any way, shape, or form. But what a wild feeling leaving that game, because you were right there. And like I've already said, you let them off the hook, which I don't know, is a different type of experience as opposed to being beaten by 10, or maybe they stretch the lead with free throws themselves in the final few minutes, beat you by a few possessions, you get blown out. We all know the different experiences, but this is one that'll take some time to get over for the fans. I hope not for the team, because you're called upon very soon again on the road now.
Yeah, you don't have any time, and you're going to face a desperate Kansas State team that is reeling right now. And it's either, I say this often, but you're either going to play Kansas State at the absolute best time or the worst time. I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. But like that was a win. And the reason I mentioned extra credit is because you're like your net ranking.
First, today's episode brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. And while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. And while you go about your day, it's all happening with no stressing, no worrying, and no waiting. Now, this is Taxes with Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Your net ranking only drops like by one, okay? And so you're right in the standpoint of it's not held against you. However, if you get it, I think you increase your margin for error. Maybe some other things are forgiven based on what your resume may look like as we go along because you had that win. So that's one of those that you'll just look back and think, oh damn, what would this look like if you'd have just figured out a way to make a free throw or a couple of free throws or a bunny for JT Toppin. And and you mentioned you did so many things well, and that's what. So I think I mentioned this to you, Cowan, in the preview that we did for Iowa State in the podcast. That was just kind of talking about this game specifically going into it. As TJ Otzelberger had talked about, okay, how do I view my team? We're not making as many threes. He's been asked about this. Well, he's like, well, this is what I'm going to look at to tell me how we are playing or not playing well, and it's points in the paint. It's free throw attempts, and it's turnovers. And when you look at it, you turn it over 15 times, they turn it over 15 times. You attempted 24 free throws, they attempted 24 free throws. You actually made 2 more free throws than they did. They were 17 to 24, you were 19 to 24. But the points in the paint part, that's where it was 50 to 32 in favor of Iowa State. But to your point, if you'd have told me that you're going to out-rebound these guys and you're going to have nearly twice as many offensive rebounds, creating some extra, possessions or extra opportunities, and you nearly had twice as many, I would have really liked my chances when you lay out all the turnovers were even, free throw attempts were even, all that stuff. And I was guilty of probably during our broadcast talking about officiating too much. I didn't like that. I felt like you had the home court advantage was a farce. I felt like BYU got a pretty good home court advantage and a home court whistle on Tuesday night in Provo, and you fought through it. I didn't think you got any kind of rub being at home against Iowa State. Why that is, I don't know. I think it was inconsistent. I think that. Like the third foul on Darion Williams and the fourth foul on Elijah Hawkins, I thought just compared to what some of the other things that are called. I thought Tamin Lipsey got away with flopping, which is involved in some of those foul calls on some of your better players, and they took the bait, and whether that's a reputation call or something, I don't know. I was probably guilty of talking about some of that too much in the broadcast, and I thought you got a couple of benefits of the doubt at the tail end where I'm like, okay, I don't know if Iowa State really fouled there, but maybe you did get, but whatever. But you had to play the game a bit differently because Elijah Hawkins missed so much time. And I think Darion Williams had to play the bulk of the second half with those 3 personals. And and they were trying to go to these post isolation plays and trying to get that 4th foul and obviously a 5th if they could. But he just kind of walled up and didn't really do that. But I think you're right. You'd love to play this one over if you could see what it looked like with some of your key guys not dealing with foul trouble for the bulk of the game and seeing if there's something else you could have done differently. Because I did think that it was a bit tricky without Elijah Hawkins on the floor for such a long period of time. However, one of the bright spots in this deal was our man CA, Christian Anderson. was pretty darn good and out of necessity in this one. I think he's really starting to flourish. You had no choice but to play him for a lot of minutes, and I think he answered the bell. And in some ways, kept you in this game, because I think without his production and ability to make shots and some of what he did on defense, you may get give up a lead and then just never be in a position to win this one. So, but damn.
Yeah, I wanted to pivot to the silver linings from this game. He was definitely going to be on that list. Couldn't avoid talking about Christian Anderson, including one shot where he's looking like Michael Jordan over Craig Elo at the free throw line. It was incredible. But you also saw some big production from Chance McMillan and JT Toppin. Darion Williams got his to a degree, but I think was still effectively limited. And all the things we're talking about, again, you could have done this, you could have done that, right down to the final seconds of overtime where Darion Williams has a shot you'd take 10 times out of 10. Kind of reminded me of a situation earlier in the season, but unfortunately doesn't fall for you. And I know the three-point shooting wasn't there for Elijah Hawkins, but how do you not take a moment to notice a 10-0 assist to turnover margin? I mean, look, you're there to win the game, so who cares at the end of the day? But something to note as he continues that kind of tear, and it's what he's done during his career, obviously finding ways to distribute and avoiding giving the basketball away to the other team. So it's not necessarily anything new, but when you're in that kind of position in the final few seconds, Chris, against a team like that, obviously you have done some good things, and those are some of the individuals, including the freshmen you mentioned, that were really standing out.
Yeah, I think Hawkins he's really now. I'm convinced that he's going to be one of your most important guys throughout the remainder of the season, and he kind of leads. It just looks a bit different, but 10 assists to 0 turnovers against that kind of defense. Again, because their defense isn't as good as it was last year. Okay, so I'm making that clear, and they were really, really good. It's close, but it's just not. Everybody will tell you this, but their offense just happens to be a bit better. But for you to play it at that level, and he had, I think, 6 or 7 assists like right out of the gate. I mean, it was in the first 10, 12 minutes of the game, and it was just like, this is what a big-time point guard is supposed to do for you. And he's not really that much of a liability on defense at all. So I think, and he can, he gets some of those steals. And anyway, he played 31 minutes and change. Maybe if he's allowed to play 35 minutes, maybe you get a different result. But again, he had the ball in his hands with the free throw line. And you mentioned that. You're right about Darion Williams. Great play call, great execution, just don't make the shot. I mean, it was right there, and you get a really good look going downhill, and it just it didn't fall. But you're right, that was in a different look, but that was St. Joe's up there in Brooklyn all over again. So he was able to close the game in Provo, but a couple of game winner opportunities, and just not able to knock them in. But damn,
that's all you can say. The margin for error gets thinner and thinner. And, when you think about the road moving forward, there is some urgency or some pressure that will be mounting because of a opportunity that gets away from you here this Saturday. But, as we talked about going into this previous week when you were on the road for 2 in Utah, and then you had this one coming up back in Lubbock, with those big challenges come big opportunities. So I think there were some things that were there were some statements made by Texas Tech that will mean not a whole lot at large across the nation because you didn't get over the hump and get a win. But as far as observing the team day to day, I said this prior to our conversation beginning off the air, Chris, that I was wondering if this was maybe Texas Tech's best game of the year, even though you don't have the result to show for it. You actually went the other direction, though, and you mentioned that you felt like you didn't even know if you actually played that well. So where are we when you think about the progress of the team and what we've most recently seen?
I think we're on the same page in that. Would you agree with me when I say this? How good is this basketball team? I don't know if we know the answer to that. I think we see certainly some positives. We see you see some questions, and I still would say to you that you're not winning this league. Okay, so I think you can remove that from the equation. but are you still a top half team? I think probably. I think the next week and a half will largely dictate that, whether you are still in that conversation or not. Now, are you a better or upper echelon top half of the league team, or you are lower top half of the league? That's where, and I probably right now, it's just, there's so many good things here, but then there's so many things that you're not necessarily great at. And that's why, like, the Iowa State game was different because, you think about it, you're going to get 2 games versus Houston. You're going to get 2 versus Arizona. You're going to get 1 in Lawrence, Kansas. There's only so many, extra credit type of wins. And there may be some more games that emerge as like, ooh, that was a good win. Didn't really realize it at the time. Kind of like your Arizona State football win, which was one thing when you got it, but then as it turned out, you're like, that's pretty salty dub right there. Because you're about to enter a stretch where you're on you 2 of your next 3 are on the road, but 3 of your next 5 are at home. You've got to continue to steal some road games, but man, at some point you're going to have to win some of these home ones. But you're about to go your 2 road games. Like, I guess let's just take this in a 5-game stretch as we talk big picture here.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app giving you everything you need for live betting, same-game parlays, and a whole lot more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com, and make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Let's take this in a 5-game stretch as we talk big picture here. Your 5-game stretch is the 2 road games are going to be against 2 teams that are kind of reeling right now, at least as we sit here and chat. Kansas State just lost by 30 at home to Houston. A lot of that has to do with Houston. But Kansas State had a 500 non-conference record. Their guards are not playing very well. They're scoring like just over 60 points a game in their 4 non-conference games, all that. And we'll talk about Kansas State, maybe on tomorrow's show. But then you're going to face a resurgent Arizona team, but you're going to get them at home. And that's going to be a potential extra credit type of win. Then you go face Cincinnati, who was also reeling. They were the belle of the ball and ranked and having a pretty good non-conference. And now reality has set in for them a bit, and that they are come back to earth a little bit. They only score 40 points against a Kansas team at home over the weekend, and they get beat. They've also lost to this Kansas State team as well. And then you've got Arizona, like I said, at home. But then you've got TCU and Oklahoma State, two teams that are, I think, unless something changes, and it could, they are lower half teams. They are not looking at an NCAA tournament bid right now. And those are 2 games at home that you get back to back. So bottom line is you need to get hot. You need to at least go 3-2 or 4-1 over this next 5 games. And obviously it would be great to win all 5 of them, but trying to be realistic. This is a stretch of your schedule where you need to take advantage. You've got to start. You need to get ahead. You need to get over the hump and stack them up so you're not win one lose one type deal, and you're over the 500 type deal. Because there are some weeks where you're going to look up and you're playing like Houston and Baylor in back-to-back, and you're going to look up and go, this is going to be a tough week, So this is why, you need to make a little hay here. And it's not like any of it's going to be easy. Manhattan, Kansas has been a house of horrors for you. I've never been to Cincinnati before, but they have a lot of that same team last year that gave you all kinds of fits in Lubbock, and you were fortunate enough to get out with a win. They've got like a 7'2" rim protector that makes things extremely difficult on you. And then there's the TCUs and Oklahoma States, which are kind of some question marks. So I don't want to say you're not any good, but I'm not really ready to say you're really good either. I just think you're you're the very definition of like a bubble type team right now. And I think that you would have been on the right side of that had you beaten Iowa State, but now you're not.
Yeah, certainly it'd be foolish to say that you're not any good. I think you've shown that you're NCAA tournament caliber. You've got NCAA tournament kind of talent, or an NCAA tournament kind of roster. I believe your head coach and his staff to be of that caliber as well. But
Yes.
that doesn't matter if you don't put it all together. So do you have an NCAA tournament resume to this point in time? We're going to be mentioning the word bubble if we got far into that conversation. I think that's the obvious reality. But you are putting together some good things, and this comes on the heels of a road trip that featured 2 straight wins. So you were there on the verge of getting hot. We're trying to get hot. We're trying to light the torch. It winds up burning our hands. We flew too close to the sun, melted our wings, but we're going to be back. We have some new wings strapped on again, and we're going to be looking to fly once again. And just like I've already said on this episode, and the everydayers hear it all the time, I've said on previous episodes, you've got these big challenges, but those come with big opportunities. So people will take notice if you're able to find your way to some success. Hopefully that begins coming up very soon from Manhattan, Kansas. We'll set the table, obviously, for that one, Red Raiders and Purple Wildcats, on an upcoming episode. And we'll also get to catching up on some of the news from the football program, I guess. I don't know if it quite reached the status of news, rumblings, smoke, whatever it might have been, involving the Red Raider ongoing portal palooza. And what might have been revealed is a quarterback pursuit, but of what caliber, and is it even real? We're going to get to that coming up as well on the next go round. So do join us, and hope you'll get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you miss none of the above. Chris, appreciate it as always. Tough one to digest, but no rest for the weary, man. Right back at it. So looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I am out on the road again later today. I feel like I just got back in town, but hey, man, that's the Big 12. Back at it, and headed to the Little Apple. So we'll break that game down coming up tomorrow night in Manhattan when we resume play here on Locked On Texas Tech. But appreciate everybody there or for listening, and everybody that was at the arena on Saturday, and hope everybody has a good start to the week.
Yes, Manhattan, Kansas, where road trips always go off without a hitch. So should be a great week.
Don't put that on me, man. Don't put that on me.
I'm speaking it into existence. Yes, thank you to the everydayers, and thank you to the Matador Mob insiders. Special shout out to our guy Brent and Lisa, 2 mobsters I had the good fortune to meet at United Supermarkets Arena on Saturday. Was great to see you, and appreciate you all being out there as always. If interested in becoming a Matador Mobster, hit the show notes, find the link there to a free 14-day trial. Try it on, see how it fits you. Your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text and straight to your phone. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.